Hi guys, Hengist here from House of Hengist Comics, and a big welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing really well. And today, this is Blitzkrieg, Episode 7, part of Operation Niwi, Martelange, I believe it's pronounced. But first, the news, and we're going to be looking at a number of maps, and I'd like to encourage you to freeze frame these if you can while you're watching the video, and then resume it. Here's a chronology. It's not necessarily in order, but it's got the key events that are occurring. And also this map, really important because it shows through colour coding the development of the German attack, the French counterattacks and the rivers involved. So have a good look at that. We've got the Germans moving forward. We've got basically the British, here's a motorcycle platoon moving forward. They're going up to the Deal line, and we've got the French armour moving up towards Gembloux Gap, and they're getting ready to counterattack. We've also got big problems on the roads with congestion. A lot of civilians have been moved out. I mean, the whole of the Sudan was basically depopulated. We've got air basically being brought in, and although the Allies have some air support, the French Air Force, much maligned, were doing a lot and shot a lot of aircraft down. The Stukas are still capable of supporting the Panzers. But the infantry that's supporting these moves forward tend to be Kratschützen or Panzer Grenadier, and they look really cream crackered, and you can see the K and the G for Kleist and Gerderen. But the armoured cars doing their job around basically spotting, finding the enemy, calling in artillery and air, and basically fanning out as a screen in front of the enemy. We've got heavier guns now coming into position where they can start firing. Denmark has obviously been occupied, and it really is a time now to see the Allies counterattack and strike back on this very first day. But a lot of their stuff is moving. They've been there for months, and you know, the attacks come quite unexpectedly. So let's look at the Belgian forces today. Again, it's the Chasseurs Ardennaises. There's a nice photograph here of a company, I believe, from 1940 in their uniforms. There's going to be about 3 platoons of those, machine guns, mortars, possibly some Guides, as you can see from this 1918 photo, where the cavalry are wearing their sort of coal packs. I like that picture. They're going to be, as I said, with machine guns and mortars and some artillery. But they are bicycle troops as well, and there may be some, I think there's a regular platoon there as well. Here's their light artillery I was talking about. No gun shield, a nice 75mm gun, useful for that support. And as I said, motorbikes with the I think it's the T15s at the back. And here's a nice picture of the carrier. So ultimately, you know, confident, trained, have got to hold the bridge. Whilst the German forces effectively here are moving up, most of their infantry will be confident, trained. They've got several platoons of them, but no pioneers. They've got Kratschützen again in the van. These will be confident veteran, like the armoured cars that will be with them in support. And there are some other support elements, some of which will be deck driven, some artillery support, but mainly mortars, I believe, and machine guns. Okay guys, let's look at the set and the research today. We'll start with a contemporary photograph. Obviously there's a lot of problems in Luxembourg straight away, and here is something I didn't know: the Schuster line, road barricades and bridge barricades. The Luxembourg army, well, there was none, and effectively, you know, the Germans just really pushed through it. And they pushed through it on a number of roll barns, as can be seen here, with 2nd, 1st and 10th Panzer. And this is a better image here at Martelange, where we see, and the game will be about elements of the advance guard of 1st Panzer contacting here at Martelange. So again, we start with the research. We couldn't find a huge amount out. This map was really helpful for us, but we've made an appeal out to the community to try and help us. So please, if you've got information, do so. Here's a map of the topography, which gives us a better idea, and another contemporary shot that we managed to find. Well, then we move to basically Google Maps. Here you can see the church. This gives us an idea of the density of terrain and the conditions around it. And Sam has then constructed the map based on this. And as you can see, there are hills on either side. We didn't put these into play because we wanted to focus really on the terrain, and you can see the density. Here will be the landing point. The bridge has been blown, as is clear from this image, but there's a lot of cover around here, and there's no place for tanks. And from these sort of church spires that you can see, here's the one in Luxembourg. It's all going to be about visibility through this density of terrain, so to speak. Okay, let's now get into the mission itself. And The Germans have made a decision. They know the bridge is blown. They're going to outflank and try and send infantry round behind to take the bridge from the rear. A bridge crossing in daylight is no easy feat, to say the least, especially under fire, and you haven't got much cover whilst you're in the water. So let's get into the specific objectives. Well, it's a standard 12-turn game. Basically, the Germans have got to get to this first objective. That's their prime objective, to get behind through the flanking manoeuvre of the crossing and secure the bridge, so the pioneers coming up can effectively get the panzers moving. The well, at that point that they contact around that well, that will start triggering an automatic withdrawal, where the Belgians are then going to have to start pulling platoons each turn, making their position quite difficult. As you can see, they've deployed between the two roads, one going to the north to Luxembourg and the south road, which is the breakout corridor. Now basically what we can see here is effectively an overview of the bridging area. Now obviously the Germans will defend all the way along that, and they must hold one platoon basically by the other end of the bridge as well. But the action, well, that's really going to take place at the crossing, and the Belgians are going to have to manoeuvre, because they've been outflanked, to get there and try and provide an opposed crossing, so to speak. The Germans have a lot of boats. They're subject to a lot of rules, skill tests. They've got to set up lines and basically get those boats back and forth to ferry their infantry. But the Germans really are starting all the way along that bank and ready to go. The rules, well, as standard, we're using ACHTUNG PANZER, which is really our own rule set now, effectively. And we're going to be using our battle deck. And without further ado, let's get into the battle action now, because it's a real good one. Well, the Belgians get the first turn and immediately occupy the steeple on the Belgian side, getting them in a position to direct their artillery. And as you can see from this picture, the Germans are beginning to move up and effectively immediately get on top of the hill. The 8 rads covering the bridge crossing. The boats and the men move up and get into a position to prepare to cross. We have a massive mistake on the bridge. They underestimated its strength, and one of the armoured cars falls into the drink, as immediately we start to see artillery open fire. The Germans hasten basically to the banks, grabbing their boats. They've been training for a long time for such operations and are very skillful, and effectively immediately jump into their dinghies and start the crossing. However, as they're beginning to cross, we start to see the first real problems encountered. It takes them a little bit of time to get their lines established. They manage to get infantry across. But then, no sooner has they've just about positioned themselves well, then the whizzing of artillery suddenly opens up, and we have the first rounds which start to explode all amongst the boats and the infantry, and casualties begin to mount. The boats, a couple of them are damaged and destroyed, and you can see the casualties on the bank. There's rounds landing from both mortars and 75mm guns, and they're consistently hitting these targets and basically causing a lot of problems. Some of the German infantry, depleted, managed to get out off the banks and start to move forward, as the German mortars now open fire with their OP up in their church spire and basically bring down smoke to give covering fire. We see a lot of damage as well occurring. One boat floats away. Some of the Germans try and get out and get it, but they're shot down. You can't see it from here, but the position is very tenuous, as suddenly we get a missed card which effectively saves the bacon of the Germans, because the Germans are now trying to cross upstream. They've swum a team out to grab a boat. The mortars are trying to cover them, but they can't see anything. And effectively the Germans manage, under a great hurrah, to get hold of this boat on the other side of the stream. The smoke lifts, and small arms fire starts coming from the buildings into the Germans who are trying to cross, but they make great saves and manage to get through as more smoke lands, covering basically the infantry now making the crossing by the river. Effectively now what we've got here going on is that the Germans, very depleted, they lost in fact over 20 men in one barrage, managed to run into the scouts. There's an assault, but the Germans actually come off worse, although they kill several scouts and are compelled to withdraw. They're limited, they're down to over 20%. The rope has been shattered by explosive fire, and the Belgians have now occupied the other side of the road to out from Luxembourg, as the Germans make a very, very good crossing, being covered by their STK-4 rads, and start peppering basically the other bank. Then we see the Belgians as well now basically trying to effectively start to consider their withdrawal options, because the well is very close to being triggered, but their gunnery was absolutely superb today, and it just keeps firing and pounding that bank line. I mean, there are German casualties flying all over the place, boats deflating or blown to pieces, and the Germans are down to, on 2 platoons, basically well below 50%, as the one I see effectively gets across the bank. The other Germans manage to control this boat with basically rifle butts and get to the other side. They make an outstanding assault and basically get into some of the buildings. The Germans re-establish their line on the other side of the river, and what is left of a very depleted platoon now tries to stake a gambit on trying to take the main position by the house. But we've got fire coming down everywhere, and the Belgians are conducting an absolutely brilliant defence. The Germans, however, have got maximum firepower on this bank, and ultimately at the house, where on the crossroads by the bridge, there's a small fight. Ultimately the German platoon is to perish. The Belgians take casualties. The one I see now leads up his second platoon, trying to establish a toehold around this house, which is by the bridge, and it's been very, very gallant by the Germans so far. But effectively, if they hadn't got that boat and got across the other side of the bridge, it would have been an absolute disaster. But they did, and it was extremely good and extremely well played by the Germans, given that they'd had such a bad start. Ultimately, what was to happen though is the Belgians conducted an excellent withdrawal, pulling one platoon after another, and they just denied basically the Germans any options whatsoever. Here we can see the Belgians pulling out one platoon at a time, covering their guns, covering their mortars, and falling back in good order. In fact, they only lost one platoon, and that was by the wharf side where that boat came in. The German OP sitting in the steeple can just watch as the Belgians pull out. But basically, the Germans have managed to sort of get to the bridge, although it is contested. But it's an Allied victory, guys, by 5 points. So Belgium got 15 and Germany got 10. I mean, ultimately, what we've got, it was a great game. It was very, very difficult to cross. The Germans just didn't have enough artillery, and you're very, very vulnerable in those boats, and they failed a lot of skill checks, which was most unfortunate. 1-8 Rad was damaged again, its tyres hit by mortars. We can see some of the detritus of former Belgian forces, and these conditions and these grounds are very complex and difficult to recreate. But a big thanks to Piers Brand of Plastic Soldier Company, who send us loads of stuff. He's a pure wargamer and wants to support us. And a big shout out to those guys, because they produce great stuff for the community, and they're really worth having a good look at. But let's not forget the fallen guys. And our next episode coming up will see the second part of this battle. So stay tuned for more from Blitzkrieg, and a very big thank you to everyone supporting us as we go forward. So it's over and out from me. Bye for now.